In the Kingdom of Macedonia, the torch of destiny was lit by Philip II, a warrior king who transformed a rough northern land into a disciplined power. Under his reign, the Macedonian phalanx was born, rows of ironclad soldiers wielding spears so long they pierced the sky. But behind Philip, a boy watched with restless eyes, his son, Alexander. Trained by Aristotle, he absorbed philosophy and science. Yet his true passion was glory. From childhood, he whispered that Achilles was his ancestor, and he dreamed not of living quietly, but of etching his name into eternity. When Philip was assassinated, the crown passed to the 20-year-old prince. Many thought Macedonia would fracture. Instead, Alexander crushed rebellions with ruthless speed, burning Thebes to the ground as a warning. None would challenge his throne. The world learned that the young king was not a boy, but a storm. Beyond the Aegean lay the richest empire the world had ever seen, Persia. For generations, it had dominated Asia, its armies stretching from Egypt to India. Yet Persia had grown complacent. Its king, Darius III, underestimated the fire rising in the west. Alexander proclaimed a holy war of revenge for the Persian invasions of Greece a century before. But in truth, it was not revenge he sought. It was immortality. With 40,000 men, he marched east. His generals, Parmenion, Hephaestion, and Ptolemy, knew the odds. Persia had wealth, numbers, and cavalry beyond measure. Macedonia had only discipline, courage, and the brilliance of their king. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont. On the shores of Asia Minor, he drove a spear into the soil and declared, "This land is won by the sword of Macedonia." Soon, at the river Granicus, the Persians awaited. Their cavalry stood glittering, their lines stretched wide. Alexander, reckless yet precise, led the charge himself. With his scarlet-plumed helmet gleaming, he plunged into the river, water splashing, arrows raining. For a moment, the young king was surrounded, struck by blades, saved only by his loyal general Clytus. But the Macedonian phalanx pressed forward, their sarissas impaling Persian riders. The river turned red, and the Persians broke. Asia Minor fell open before him. Cities that had once bowed to Persia now bent the knee to Alexander. The campaign had begun, and the world would never be the same. After the triumph at the Granicus, Alexander swept across Asia Minor like a blazing wind. City after city opened its gates. Some resisted, but most yielded, for the Persian satraps fled before his advance. His army grew, not just in numbers, but in faith. They believed their young king was chosen by the gods. But Persia would not let this insult pass. Darius III himself assembled a host, said to number over 100,000 men, drawn from every corner of his vast empire. Archers from the east, cavalry from the steppes, spearmen from Mesopotamia, all to crush the Macedonian upstart. The two armies met at Issus, near the Mediterranean coast in 333 BC. The ground was narrow, squeezed between mountains and sea. The Persians, with their numbers, should have crushed Alexander in open battle, but here the terrain strangled their advantage. Alexander, ever the gambler of war, placed his phalanx in the center, shields locked, spears bristling. On the right, he commanded his cavalry, ready to spearhead the attack. On the left, Parmenion held the line against Persian pressure. Across the field, Darius stood upon a golden chariot, surrounded by guards, his banners high, the weight of empire behind him. The battle erupted in thunder. Arrows darkened the sky as the Persians surged forward. The Macedonian phalanx braced, their sarissas piercing through the storm. Alexander, with fire in his eyes, led his companion cavalry into the heart of the Persian left. He struck like lightning, cutting a path straight toward Darius himself. For a moment, the battlefield trembled as the two kings neared. Alexander's scarlet plume flashed. Darius, pale with fear, saw the storm approaching. At the decisive instant, Darius lost his nerve. He turned his chariot and fled. The sight shattered Persian morale. Their lines crumbled, their soldiers broke and scattered. The Macedonians pursued, slaughtering without mercy. The once mighty Persian army dissolved into chaos. In the Persian camp, Alexander found unimaginable treasures: gold, silver, and even Darius's own family, his wife, mother, and daughters. But unlike a mere conqueror, Alexander treated them with respect, earning him both admiration and fear. Issus was not just a victory. It was the meeting of kings, where one proved unworthy and the other ascended to legend. Persia trembled. The world now whispered a name that would echo forever: Alexander the Great. After Issus, Alexander pressed deeper into Persia's dominion. City after city fell, and resistance seemed futile. Yet Alexander was not just a conqueror. He was a visionary. In Egypt, he was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. There, he founded a city that would carry his name for eternity: Alexandria, a beacon of knowledge and power. At the temple of Ammon in the Siwa oasis, priests hailed him as the son of Zeus. Whether he believed it or not, Alexander embraced the myth, weaving divinity into his destiny. He was no longer merely a king, he was becoming a legend. In 331 BC, the fate of Persia was sealed at Gaugamela. Darius, desperate to redeem his honor, gathered an army said to be over 200,000 strong, bringing war elephants, scythed chariots, and warriors from every corner of his empire. The plain was wide, chosen to unleash Persia's numbers. But Alexander's brilliance shone brightest in the face of impossible odds. He extended his lines, drawing the Persians wide. Then, at the perfect moment, he led his companion cavalry in a diagonal thrust, a maneuver so daring it pierced straight through the Persian center. The phalanx followed, shields locked, spears thrusting. Dust filled the air, screams split the heavens, and the earth shook beneath the clash of nations. As at Issus, Alexander rode directly at Darius. Again, the Persian king faltered. Fear overcame him. He abandoned his army and fled. His soldiers, seeing their king desert them, dissolved into panic. The battlefield became a slaughter. The Persian army, vast and mighty, was broken by the iron discipline of Macedonia and the fury of one man's will. Gaugamela was not just a battle. It was the end of an empire. Persia, the great colossus of the East, bowed before the son of Macedonia. Alexander entered Babylon in triumph, welcomed with open gates. He took the title King of Kings, the heir of Darius, master of the greatest empire on earth. Yet conquest only fueled his hunger. Persia was his, but his gaze turned further east, to lands whispered in legend, to India, where new challenges and new glories awaited. The boy who dreamed of Achilles now stood as a living myth. His shadow stretched from Greece to the Nile, from Babylon to the edge of the world. But destiny had not finished with Alexander. With Persia crushed, Alexander's empire stretched farther than any before him. But for the young king, conquest was not enough. He hungered for the edge of the world, for the lands whispered of in myth. India, where new kingdoms rose under strange gods. His soldiers followed, weary, yet bound to his vision. Through deserts and mountains they marched, forging roads across impossible landscapes. Each step east was a step into legend. In 326 BC, Alexander faced his greatest test at the Battle of the Hydaspes. Across the river stood King Porus, towering, proud, commanding an army with war elephants, beasts the Macedonians had never seen. At dawn, Alexander feigned one crossing, then struck at another. His cavalry thundered across the waters, clashing with Porus's horsemen. The elephants charged, shaking the earth, tusks drenched in blood. Yet Alexander adapted, his phalanx surrounding the beasts, striking their flanks, breaking their will. The battle was fierce, brutal, unlike any before. But in the end, Porus was captured. When asked how he wished to be treated, he answered, "As a king." Impressed, Alexander restored him to his throne, gaining not just a subject, but an ally. Yet even as Alexander triumphed, his men faltered. Exhausted, longing for home, they refused to march further east. For the first time, Alexander's will was denied. He turned back, his dream of reaching the world's edge unfinished. On the journey home, tragedy followed. His beloved horse Bucephalus, companion through every campaign, died. Alexander named a city after him, but the loss weighed heavily. His men suffered through deserts, starvation, and storms. Glory had a price, and it was blood. In 323 BC, in the city of Babylon, Alexander fell ill. Whether by fever, poison, or exhaustion, none can say. At 32 years old, the conqueror of the world lay dying. His generals asked, "To whom do you leave your empire?" With fading breath, he whispered, "To the strongest." The empire fractured after his death, carved by his generals, but his name endured. Alexander had crossed continents, toppled empires, and reshaped the world. He dreamed of unity, of blending East and West, of a legacy greater than any kingdom. And though his body turned to dust, his legend became eternal. Alexander the Great, the boy who sought to be Achilles, and became greater still.